opened in 1892. In the late 1870s, from where we're standing and sitting right here, in a radius of about 10 miles, we called that the district. The population at that time was 15 people. By 1890, the population had grown to 50,000. Now, I imagine you know why that was. We had a little gold strike going on up here, that's right. So the number of people living in the area mushroomed completely. 25,000 of those 50 actually resided in our little town of Cripple Creek. It was a very busy and bustling place. Obviously, a lot of these folks, most of them came here for riches and gold. They had no idea what it was going to be like to live in an environment like this. A lot of them thought they'd make their fortunes early and head on out. A lot of them did. Also, a lot of them didn't. Mining is a difficult task and a dangerous task, and certainly deaths were involved. 1892, we realized, the city fathers, that we had a big population. They weren't all going to go home safely. We didn't have a cemetery. So thanks to the generosity of two individuals in town, a couple of real estate boys down there, Mr. Bennett and Mr. Myers. Their names are on the main street and the street right below it. They were very modest fellows. They named the streets after themselves. But in their generosity, they donated the 40 acres of land in which we're standing and sitting right now. Everybody in town thought that was a wonderful gesture. Land was hard to get. It was valuable up here. It was considered a wonderful thing that they did. Well, they knew more about it than most people. They didn't tell us that where we are standing is pretty much solid granite. The slopes and the soil up here was almost impossible to build on. What a wonderful place for a cemetery. About 1920s, late 20s to early 30s, the gold rush up here in Cripple Creek, it basically stopped. The value of gold had gone down and other commodities were more important. The town of Cripple Creek started to really become very much a ghost town. From that time until the late 70s, this cemetery basically sat unattended. No one was here to take care of it. Nobody did anything to it except come up, knock over headstones, deface the place, and basically put it into ruin. Well, in 1975, a gentleman from town, longtime resident named Art Tremaine, decided that he was not going to stand for that anymore. He and a young man came up here and for the next 25 years, and at no cost, literally brought this cemetery back to life. Now, Art Tremaine is still with us. He's in his 90s now. His wife is buried up here. If you want to talk to Art and get some real good stories, I'll tell you where you can find him. Every afternoon, 4 o'clock, he's sitting at the bar at the Elks Club on Bennett Street, having a toddy. He's sitting in a chair with his name embossed on the back. And God forbid anybody that sits at Mr. Tremaine's chair. In 1992, gaming came to the city. Some that was a good thing, some that was a bad thing. For those of us that love the history in the city and the cemetery, it was a good thing. A fund was generated from the revenues that the state gets from those taxes, called the Historic Preservation Fund. And from that fund, we now are annually given a check from the state, which we use to help preserve the buildings in town, to keep them as you see them. Part of that money also goes to an endowment to maintain the cemetery, which is now actually maintained by the city of Cripple Creek. So that, in effect, while a scourge to others, was a good thing for us. The gaming actually saved us up here. For those that don't know, my name is Digger Odell, and I had the pleasure of being the undertaker here for the first 30 years of the cemetery's existence. Life up here was not easy. As I mentioned, the conditions themselves were bad, let alone the work conditions. It was a very dangerous place to work. Needless to say, I was kept very busy. The problem, obviously, was accentuated by the fact that we do have granite right here. Digging graves was a bit of a difficulty. I didn't have backhoes and modern conveniences. The way I did it, take a hand chisel, bore a core about 7 feet down through the granite, put a stick of dynamite in it, and then literally blow it up. That's how it worked. My folks moved here in 1890. I was a young buck then, just a kid in my teens. My folks weren't looking for gold. They were retailers. They actually had a general store on Bennett Avenue. Well, being a young buck, selling underwear and t-shirts with all these buff miners running around, it didn't really make me feel very good. I wanted something else to do. When the cemetery opened, I jumped at the chance to be the undertaker up here. Like I say, I was very, very busy. At the current time, we have over 4,000 permanent residents that we know and know of. Mr. Tremaine, in his many years of working up here, allowed us to discover where these little grave markers are, another 1,200 unmarked graves. We also have a potter's field over here, just to your right, is an 8-acre section with only one monument on it. That houses, we think, at least 3,000 residents. Names unknown. The living conditions for me in town were pretty good. Mom and Dad did good. There were 35 millionaires in town. The general store was doing well. Our family was doing quite nicely. We had a nice home. Mom and Dad bought it for $500. It was great. You could buy a lot in town at that time for $25. You could buy a corner lot for $50. Things were all good in town. 1892, we had electricity. First town west of St. Louis to have electricity, and it's believed we had electricity before New York City. Our house had running water and sewer by 1895. We were doing okay. If you look across behind my shoulders here, across those hillsides, you can envision thousands of shanties, tents, canvas tents, hovels. That's where the people you're going to meet today live. Those are the folks that made this town what it was. All the millionaires that came up here, none of them were buried here. Their snooty little families thought that this was not a good enough place for them. They took their riches and their family deceased members down, and they were buried in either Colorado Springs or Denver. The living conditions up here were intolerable. The wind chill on that hill in the wintertime up here when the wind blows can be 60 degrees below zero. There can be a lot of snow. Recently it hasn't, but there can be up to 10 feet, and there were at times up to 10 feet of snow. The best place to work in the winter was down in the mines. The temperature down there was an ambient temperature of 56 degrees. The real strugglers were the moms and the kids who lived up on top. I told you I was a pretty busy guy for the first many years here. The first 20 years of my working up here, I buried over 2,000 children under the age of 6. It was very, very rough conditions up here. The average lifespan between 1890 and 1900 up here was 23 years. The next decade, it jumped to 33. And now it's over 70. We've come a long way. The people that you're going to meet today and the stories you're going to hear actually existed, and what you hear is absolutely true. I would like you to take that and appreciate that as you walk through the tour today, knowing what it took for these people to survive up in this area. So with that, I'd like to introduce your guide today, Diane Melody, this lovely lady to my right.